A service request, on the other hand, is a request for either a new or a change to an existing service. The agreed service is not disrupted. There's nothing that has failed or is broken. So the time frames are going to be much longer typically, as we go through possibly an approval process. Maybe we need to order particular components from a supplier. And again, that's where a service request is really more related to change management as opposed to incident management. And it is helpful if you classify the records that you receive. So classify them and differentiate them between incidents and service requests. So service operation is the last phase of the life cycle before continual service improvement. So the continual service improvement forms the outer ring of the 5 phases of the life cycle, and this is where we focus on quality assurance. This is the Deming cycle that I mentioned earlier. It starts with planning. We then do or implement based on our plans. We check and monitor, measure, and then finally we take corrective action where necessary, and the cycle starts all over again. So I usually remind my customers that when they are working with any type of software, including the software that we help them implement, the expectation is that the needs of the organization will continue to grow and change, and therefore it may be necessary a few months or a year down the road to go through this plan, do, check, act, and possibly take corrective action and make changes where necessary. This Deming cycle is the basis of the CSI model in the ITIL service life cycle. Another component of continual service improvement is reporting, and the reports or metrics that we talk about we refer to as KPIs. There are a lot of different metrics that can be measured, but only the most important ones are considered KPIs, and those KPIs should be based upon our critical success factors. So it's not just reporting for reporting's sake, but we first want to know and understand what is our objective, what is it that we're trying to achieve, and then based on that we can then develop the appropriate KPIs. So an organization that's trying to encourage teamwork should be careful about reporting individual staff member performance KPIs, because that's going to foster competition, not necessarily teamwork. So bottom line is, be careful of how you develop the KPIs, because those are going to help to determine the behavior of your staff. To give you a few examples of KPIs related to service transition, if I determine, for example, that a critical success factor for my organization is to have the appropriate authorization for changes. I may have an audit coming up and I want to be sure that I have the appropriate authorization for changes. So I will want to keep track of unauthorized changes, make sure that those aren't happening. So I want to see a reduction in unauthorized changes. So if I look at my configuration management system, I want to be sure that I'm not seeing changes to the CIs that have not been approved. Emergency changes, or a large number of emergency changes, indicate a certain level of risk for an organization. So if I want to minimize the disruptions, if I have that as a critical success factor, then I certainly want to see a reduction in the number of emergency changes. Some KPIs for release management. Again, I highlight the concept here of testing. So I've determined that it's important to release new business services so that we can take advantage of new business opportunities. I'm working with a customer right now that is in a competitive environment. They need to make changes quickly, so they have employed agile development practices. We are working now to help them to integrate this whole concept of agile development with ITIL and the appropriate levels of of risk mitigation, because outages are deadly for organizations. So we want to be sure that we have adequate testing. We don't want to be generating incidents because of a release, and we certainly don't want to see failed releases. Knowledge management. If we are looking at having an integrated system that publishes knowledge, then certainly we want to keep track of how many articles are being added to our knowledge base, how many incidents have been resolved by knowledge articles, or do we have the ability to hopefully see and understand how many incidents may have been prevented by self-service knowledge. So there are tools that we work with that actually track the searches for knowledge within a self-service knowledge base and can keep track of incidents that were avoided because a self-service end user utilized the knowledge base. Finally, KPIs for ITSACM. If we want to have better accounting and workflow correlation, we want to see links between the incidents and CIs, again, so that these service desk analysts know what type of equipment it is that they're supporting when an end user calls. We want to keep track of things like unauthorized software that might be deployed. So the systems that we work with and that we implement for our customers allow us to see things like software license compliance reporting. So this takes us, we are almost at the end of our time for today's presentation. So this takes us to an overview of our integrated approach and how we can help our customers with these processes and implementing them within our customers' organizations. So there are a number of different tools that we use. The first one is assessments. So we work with many of our customers either before the deployment of a service management technology or perhaps after deployment, maybe a few months or a year after the initial deployment of the software. We can provide lots of guidance for maximizing the usage of these products and technologies. So you may want to extend the usage beyond IT perhaps to other groups within the organization. What we're finding right now is that a lot of organizations are extending beyond incident management, and they're starting to utilize more the change management, the configuration management components of the software that they're using. We can work with organizations to develop key findings or in specific ITIL process areas, and we can make recommendations for improvements. We have ITIL classes and briefings that we can provide, and I'll give you a little bit more detail there. We do have a class coming up, so the first week in October we will be providing an ITIL v3 Foundation certification class. This will be on October 3rd, and that's going to be held at our headquarters in Vienna, Virginia. So if any of you all are in the DC area or would like to come to DC for a visit, we are in Tyson's Corner and have a class on October 3rd through the 5th. And you can find more information on that on our website. We also work with process models that provide technical and consulting information for the various tools that our customers use. So we have process models that provide a full integrated web approach to managing the processes and providing very detailed procedure and work instruction information for your end users or staff members. So when you are deploying some of these new ITIL processes, it helps to really provide them step-by-step instructions. A little bit more information about the assessments that we provide. In addition to some of the tool-specific assessments that we provide, we also provide the Pathfinder assessment. Pathfinder is a packaged methodology for providing assessments. It's much more scientifically based than just having a consultant come out and provide recommendations based on his or her own personal preferences or experience. The Pathfinder assessment has standardized surveys that are deployed out to your stakeholders. It is very low in terms of the time that is required by the stakeholders. They can complete the surveys in their own time over the web. The enablement for the assessment is just a few days of a consultant being on site to review the profile of the organization and to get and understand what some of the preferences might be in terms of what are some of the areas on which you need to focus. Once we have the focus area, we send out the surveys and can very quickly and easily develop a set of recommendations and a roadmap for the organization that are statistically based and that can be tracked in terms of milestones. So we'd be happy to talk to you all more about these Pathfinder assessments if you find you need a little bit more guidance related to some of the ITIL processes and their implementation. We have a number of training offerings specifically related to ITIL. First of all, I mentioned the October 3rd class. We can also come out to our customer sites to conduct this training. For individuals or organizations who may just need more of an ITIL overview, in addition to this webinar series, we do also offer tailored briefings for different focus areas. And we also offer the Polestar simulation exercise, which is a team building exercise and that introduces ITIL concepts and the service lifecycle framework. And then finally, we do offer administrator and end user training for the tools that we deploy. To wrap up here, so we've covered briefly the 5 core lifecycle phases, and we've gotten into more detail about service transition. For many organizations, service transition has become very important because they need to have better accounting for the configuration items or CIs within their infrastructure, and because they need to provide the appropriate levels of reporting for either corporate governance or for external regulations and the auditors that need to review those reports. So we'd be happy to work with you all if you have additional questions or concerns about service transition or any of the other topics that we covered here today.